So the bigger question that we have over here is, can we completely avoid the negative attempts in Ipmat exams? So in the Ipmat exams, if I talk about the IIM Indore and the rest of the exams, so you already know that the difficulty level of the questions is quite high. Now the another thing that adds fuel to the fire is the negative marking that makes us very, we can say, we get so much demoralized when we get to know, when we realize that there is another thing that we need to beat in the exam. So we will address this problem of yours in this video. So in the next few minutes, I'll be clarifying all your confusions, all your doubts that you guys have regarding your exam. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now let's move on to the big question that we have, and that is it even possible to score with 0 wrong answers? So many students ask this, that is there any trick or is there any strategy using which we can just give 0 wrong answers in our exam? And the second thing is, should you aim for no negative marking at all? So is there anything that we can follow or do to avoid the negative marks in our exam? Right? So we will be just addressing everything, and I'll be telling you the right approach, the right strategy. So moving forward, let's get to the reality check, right? So in your Ipmat exam, what are the things that are going to be tested? The first thing is the speed, the second thing is the accuracy, and the third one is decision making, right? So the time pressure usually leads to uncertainty, and because of that we just answer the questions incorrectly many times, even though we know that the correct answer would be what, or later we realize the correct answer for the question. So in Ipmat exam, 0 mistakes is not at all practical, because over there you are not just going to prove how accurate the answers are. In the meantime, you will be competing, you will be trying to beat the time, so you are going to manage as per the time, right? So also it requires the quick decision making, and these are the things that makes it very complicated to avoid any mistakes in the exam. Now moving forward to next we have the core idea. So what is the core idea over here? So the next score that is going to be is what? That means the score that you are going to attain for your exam will be the result of the correct answer minus the negative marks. So the marks that you will be rewarded for correct answers, simultaneously there would be negative marking as well, and from the marks that you attain for the correct answers, the negative markings would also be deducted, right? So avoiding all risks actually leads to fewer attempts, and that is not at all going to be helpful. And the second thing is, if you use too many guesses for the questions that you are not sure about, for sure you will be given the negative marking for that. So over here what we actually need is, we actually need the balance, right? So we have to avoid what? We have to avoid the fewer attempts, also we have to avoid the negative marks. So we have to create a balance between the two, and that is what is going to help you score better in your exams. Now moving forward, next we have is the right approach. So you guys must be thinking, what should be the right approach then, right? So the right approach is focus on maximizing your net score. That means you have to, you need to try to answer the questions as correct as you can, and you have to avoid the negative attempts as much as you can, right? So we have to focus on maximizing the net score and not on eliminating all the wrong attempts. So what we need to do over there is, we have to give preference to the smart attempts more than more attempts, right? So the priority in your exam should be smart attempts and not more attempts. Now moving forward to next we have the 3-layer strategy that I will recommend you guys to follow. And the 3-layer strategy is what? The first one is the sure shot questions, the second one is the high probability questions, and third one is avoid zone. So let's discuss all the 3 layers. So first we have is the sure shot, and that means you have to answer, you have to attempt those questions that you are 100% confident about, right? So 100% confidence is needed. Second thing is you have to avoid guessing in these kinds of questions. So the first thing that you need to focus on is you have to attempt the questions that you are 100% confident about. You don't need to do any guessing for such questions, and this will eventually lead to the build of safe score. Also attempt in the first round, that means that these sorts of questions must be attempted in the first round only. Next thing that we have is the high probability layer 2. And what does that mean? It means that if there are questions in which you are just 70 to 80% confident about, then you can answer these kinds of questions. In these kinds of questions, you can eliminate the questions you are not at all sure about, and you have to take the calculated risks. You don't have to be we can say very daring while answering these questions. So you should eliminate the options. You should use the strategy of eliminating in such questions. If you come across such questions that you are not 100% sure about, so in those questions you can use the eliminating strategy, and that will eventually lead to the correct answer for sure, right? So these kinds of questions must be answered in the second round. That means first of all you need to identify the types of questions that you are 100% sure about. So answer them in the second round. You will be using the eliminating strategy for the questions that you are just 70 to 80% sure about. Now moving forward is the avoid zone, that is the questions that you don't have any idea about. So these kinds of questions must be avoided, right? Why? So over here, if you don't have any idea regarding those questions, so in such cases, in such questions, you can't use the elimination strategy. So over here, the elimination is not at all possible, and eventually you won't get the correct answer. And the priority over there is not that you have to attempt all the questions. The priority is you have to avoid the questions that you are not at all sure about. Next thing is you have to avoid the high risk of the negative marking, and these sort of questions must be avoided by you, and you can just skip these types of questions over here. Now moving forward, let's just discuss with the example. For say we have 30 correct questions. Okay, so over here we have case 1, that is for say you have answered the questions correctly and the number is 30 and 10 questions were wrong, right? Second case is you answer 25 questions correctly and 3 were wrong. So the higher score will eventually be in the case 2 because there are less wrong attempts, and for that less negative markings would be there. But in the case 1, even though you have correctly answered the 30 questions, but due to the incorrect answers, the marks will be deducted from the correct ones as well. So over here, the accuracy matters more than attempts. So you have to focus on accuracy more than the attempts. So if you are thinking that the more you will answer the questions, the lesser would be the chances of the negative markings. So this is not at all going to be practical, because the negative attempts would also be the scores for the negative attempts would also be deducted from your questions that you had correctly answered, right? So the common mistakes that you should avoid, that I will suggest you to follow, and that is avoid blind guessing the questions, spending too much time on one question. So you have the time limit over there. So if you think that spending more time on one particular question will eventually let you to get the correct answer. So this is not at all going to happen, right? So you need to focus, you need to act practically in your exams. Next thing is emotional attachment to the question. Sometimes we just get too much emotional about the questions, for say that I could answer this question, I'm just unable to get to the crux of this question. I wish I knew the correct answer for this question, and in such cases what actually happens is we end up spending too much time on these kinds of questions, these sorts of questions. This eventually leads to what? The wastage of time. So we have to avoid time wastage over here, right, because we have to beat the time as well. Next one is ignoring the mock analysis. So whenever you attempt any mock, whenever you take any mock test, so you should at least go through the questions, you should analyze your attempts, you should analyze what were your mistakes, what kind of questions were answered by you incorrectly, what were the questions that were unattempted, and why those sorts of questions were unattempted by you. Was it the time limit or what? So you should always analyze your mock test that you would be taking. Now moving forward to next, what are the pro tips that I'll be giving you guys, and that is attempt in rounds the way I had suggested. You can follow it. Next thing is use the elimination method for the questions that you are just 70 to 80% sure about. Next is set the time limits whenever you are practicing the questions, and practice with analysis. Okay, so whenever you are practicing the question, you should analyze your practice. So what is the final takeaway over here? And that is it is not at all completely possible to avoid the negative attempts in the exams. So in that case, you can just control your negative attempts, and that would happen only when you will start acting smartly. So we can say that in our exam we need to play smart, not safe, not reckless. We just need to play smart over there. So that's all for today, guys. I hope this session was helpful for you, and this session was insightful for you to understand the basics of the exams. So that's all for today. We will catch up soon on the platform. Till then, stay tuned and connected.